to the fall season. Amazing. So all good, right? So we are ready to rock. We have a special guest all the way from Florida today. Nancy Krauss is in. We'll talk about learning, training, all of those kind of things that I think all of us at some point, if we have lived anything at any time in the workplace, we've undergone training. And has it been effective? And we'll learn more about tips and tricks that we can utilize to try to get the most out of it, if that's possible. So we'll get started. I guess, Teddy, you want to get the thing underway and then introduce me, and we'll get moving on.
Welcome to Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. I'm Teddy, in case you don't know. My other guy, the other guy with the shiny, not so shiny head because he polished it, or what do you do? Baby powder or something?
Yeah, well, I had to get the comb out today too. So, but yeah, I think it's good. So
good. Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. So anyway, we do this every Wednesday. We get live at 11:55 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, bringing conversations to you, all kinds of areas. A lot of it touches on job search, career transition, career journey. But often these conversations apply to all of us, even those of us who have, full careers and, huge businesses where we're making $86 million a year in my mind, or enough money to buy my beer and cigars. So anyway, I'm Teddy Burriss. I work for Burriss Consulting. For LinkedIn strategists, all about teaching people how to use LinkedIn as a business tool. And I love what I do, and I love hanging out with Randy every Wednesday and meeting our special guests. So, hey, Randy, would you do me a favor and introduce yourself to our, what is it, 17,000 people who are already on here?
You bet you better believe it. We'll do that. I'll tell you what, we started this show back in April of 2020. We've been at it a year and several months now, and so really enjoy it. It's been a good ride, and it's an opportunity for us to learn more about a lot of different topics. So today's no different. But again, Randy Wooden, I work with Goodwill Industries of Northwest North Carolina, based here in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and enjoying the I guess kind of cloudy, humid weather today, but as anything was better than yesterday. We got hammered with that Fred storm and all of the hurricane gust winds or whatever. I don't know, just a bunch of stuff. But hey, look, if you're a professional, you need some help in the job hunt, track me down. We're free, happy to help you. Find me on LinkedIn and so forth. Excited this week. We've got Nancy Krauss joining us. Are you from Miami? Are you down in Miami? Is that where you are?
I am in Miami.
You're in Miami. Now, I'm a Patriots fan, so we're gonna have to get things straight here. But it sounds like you might have spent some time up in New England, Nancy, given that accent.
I'm a New Yorker.
Close enough.
Spent a lot of time in New England just on vacations because I love to hike. I love mountains. I don't know why I'm in Florida, but that's a story for another day.
You like swamps, right? Big swampland. There's a lot of that. Yeah. But Nancy Krauss joins us. She has had a great career over the years in training, learning, and organizational development, and not just one little training thing and moving on to something, but that's been your career, really has been in corporate America, and also I think as a consultant, consulting in a variety of industries. So if you could give folks just kind of a brief background of you, and then also why you do what you do. What's the passion that you bring to your work?
Okay, so I started my career intentionally in the early 1980s. I was one of the few people who said to myself, I want to do this. And I got a master's degree and I became an instructional designer. And now I'm a recovered instructional designer, but that started my journey. I've done almost everything in the human performance in business or in the workplace continuum. And we're going to talk a little bit about that because learning, training is all about performance. If you want to know all the things I've done, then, meet me on LinkedIn, but I have worked in Fortune 500s, nonprofits. I've done 10 years of external consulting for all different kinds of industries. And I love what I do because I think what we do in this field of learning and performance is make the workplace a better place to be, and really help people do their best at whatever it is they're meant to be doing.
Cool.
Yeah, and it's a big world. There are a lot of people with a lot of different interests and motivations and such. And so we're going to dive into that in a little more detail. By the way, Teddy's monitoring the chat box. So if you have questions for Nancy or comments, please put them in the chat box. Teddy will keep an eye on that. Also, let us know where it is you're watching us from. So we're always interested in the reach of our show to see where that extends. We've had
our executive producer demands that we monitor this information and figure out where you guys are from.
Are you the executive producer?
Yeah, that's me.
Oh, okay. All right. So, well, all right. I'm with you. I wanted to be because I was hoping I'd get a raise, but apparently that's not in the card. So, Nancy, let's first talk about the definitions. If you're going to define terms, everybody's heard the word training. And so we can look to define that. And then you also talk about performance. So let's first take how do you define training? What is that? What is training?
You're asking me to could I take a different tack and just show you where training sits in the world of performance and then define it? Because defining is, okay. So
however you want to do it.
I'm going to show, first of all, I'd like to position training. Can you see my screen? I'm trying to share. Let me share.
Not yet. Can't see it yet, but
so I'd like to position training in the realm of really work. Now you should be able to see my screen. Yes or no?
Yeah.
You got it. Okay. So real quick, training has to do with skill building and learning. I mean, that's my quick definition, but I want to first debunk one of the myths about training, which is that it can solve all kinds of problems that people have at work, because it can't. Training or helping people learn and develop and build skill is one of the few things that organizations can do to help people be better performers. So I want to position, if you look at this model, you see number 4 on the bottom, it says skills and knowledge. Skills and knowledge are the only gap that can be filled via a learning experience, formal training, anything that falls under the umbrella of training. So I want to just show you quickly that there are so many other things that go into making a workplace where people can thrive. So the first one, am I done? Did you give me the, yeah?
No, you're
okay. Yeah,
you're good.
The first one is expectations and feedback. And let me just backtrack for a second to say, often people will leaders will approach a training department or a training professional and say, hey, our people need training because blah, 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 blah. There are questions that skilled learning professionals will ask. This is called a needs assessment to really understand, is this a problem that we can fix with training, or is it because, number one, you'll all relate to this if you've worked someplace. Learners are not exactly clear on what is expected. They don't all know very crisply and clearly what they're supposed to be doing. And it sounds simplistic, but it's a huge issue. They don't get feedback. They don't really know how they're doing. Shifting to number 2, tools and resources. I've often done projects with huge corporations where I try to understand at a very granular level, what is a particular role? We've got 8,000 people doing sales, for example. What do they do, and really breaking it down? And then I ask a lot of other questions. And oftentimes I find out people know what to do and they've been trained. They don't have the right computers, the right systems, the right informations. They don't have access to a network. You're getting the idea. Number 3, consequences. If people don't understand, why they should do something, that would more be motivation. If people are doing a great job and they're not rewarded, or if they see other people surrounding them doing not a good job and getting, the goodies, that's hugely demotivating, and you're not going to get great performance.
Yeah, good point. So yeah, Teddy, you had a quick question.
Yeah. So Nancy, I like that slide. Can I get a copy of that? I'd like to later on send me a copy. I'd like to share that if I could.
And
make sure you put your name on and your company name as well.
Okay.
Or your LinkedIn profile, whatever.
I want to give credit to Carl Binder. This is
okay. Yeah, good. I mean, because I think those areas are areas that as employees we need to understand, because we just can't walk into the boss and say, train me and I'll be a better employee.
Exactly.
We have to focus on all those individual pieces and understand how our actions, our attitudes, our behavior, our perspective, et cetera, all aligns with those areas, including getting training to become better. So thanks. That's good to share that.
Can I add quickly one more that's really, really important? And it's, people debate this all the time, but it's a fact. It's not a myth that you need to be doing a job that you have the basic capabilities to be able to do. You know, and that has to do with selecting the right people. You know, you've heard of square person, round hole. People are naturally fit and want to do certain things. So you're not going to get people in the wrong job to do better at their job, most likely.
Yeah. So it means that as a job seeker, I should be focusing on the right kind of spaces where I know I have at least the core ability to grow.
Exactly. And that it's an area that you're interested in. So for example, if people, can I ask a question to the audience and have them answer in the chat?
Oh, let's see what happens. We want to move on to the next bullet point as soon as we can, though.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, trainers, people in learning, ask a lot of questions to understand their art. So I would love to know, you know, if there are people who have had an interest in learning or, you know, joining this field. I mean, if you're in a corporation where there is a function of people who do what we do, there are lots of ways that you can be able to morph yourself into being able to work with them and eventually maybe be one of them. So I was just curious about that. But okay.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. If anybody is involved in L&D or talent development, drop in, you know, whether or not you're in there today or looking to get in that job, drop in the chat the area in learning and development you're interested in. Randy? I
wonder, we talk about you know, being on the right people on the bus and being in the right seat on the bus kind of thing. And I wonder how much weight assessments or what role assessments play in ensuring that we've got the right person in the right seat on the bus. Because I think you talked about, and I'll paraphrase here, but you know, there's the 1, 2, and the how to. And I may have the ability to do something, but if I don't give a crap, then you know, all the training in the world's not going to move. It's like pushing a wet noodle. Somebody told me that a long time. Teddy, have you ever heard that term before?
Yeah. I think I taught that to you, Randy.
Pushing a wet noodle. You can't do it. So how do you uncover, what are some ideas that you have to uncover the want to? How do you get at, hey, is this guy going to benefit from training or is this just a waste of time?
Randy, you're brilliant. That is a great question. I'm going to first answer about assessments. Assessments is a world unto itself. I've used and I've developed assessments. I'm not an industrial organizational psychologist, but I've worked very closely with lots of them. There are assessments. The key to any assessment is understanding whether the tool you're using is measuring what you want to know. And what you want to know about any particular field is what are the skills, knowledge, and abilities. And of course, that includes, you know, motivation. Do you want to do it? So there are lots of different assessments. Would you like to see what the capabilities are that people in the field need now?
To be a trainer?
To be in the learning and development field.
Let's hold off. Let's going to hold off on that till the end, because we may have people that are interested in that. What I want to dig into is to understand, first of all, how do you define training? What is it in your world? Let's talk, you know, you talk about training versus performance. What are some things, you know, we've all sat through these stupid, boring trainings that last a day or two, and it feels like I aged a year. So how do we avoid those
But
potholes?
Randy, I
That kind
had
of stuff.
43 slides in that slide deck, dude. It was important that you see every one of them.
I made it through 30 of them and I fell asleep, but I consider that a win because I stayed awake. But that's the kind of stuff I want to understand, what's been good about training you've seen over the years. What are some things, if you had a magic wand, you can go back and say, dude, you guys have been doing this wrong. Here are some new things that training needs to embrace if it really wants to be effective and bottom line effective.
Okay.
That
First
kind of stuff.
Again, you're brilliant, Randy. Yeah, so I'm sorry, I apologize for all the bad training. And as a matter of fact, about 10 years ago, I was asked to fix some bad training, and the name of the company I did this for at the time was called something, we fix bad training. So there's a lot of that. I'm sorry, you did not have capable professionals, in charge. There are lots of things that make for good training. I won't talk about the bad. First of all, again, it's understanding why are you doing this training? What exactly needs to be trained? How do people think and learn and understand? I mean, in the last 10 years, cognitive science has become huge in training. We know a lot more now about how the brain works and what will help people learn and remember and what will not. So any good training has to take those things into consideration. Metrics, numbers, analysis, there's a ton of, these are newish capabilities. Understanding data and using data, because now, as in every profession in the world, we're really into, did this work? Did this help? Are people doing now what they were trained to do? Because it's not so much about the bad PowerPoint that you saw, it's what did you take from that PowerPoint, which isn't really training, that's just giving information. What did you take and do on your job? Because that's the goal of training or helping people learn, is how can they be better at what they do? And it's not always just a technical capability, although those are huge, obviously.
Right.
How do they relate better with people? How can they be a better leader? I mean, learning leadership development is in and of itself a huge, area in learning and development. So, help training leaders. But what they do as a learning event, we're not so big on learning events anymore. You'll see a lot of organizations, and there are lots of platforms that are doing the proper instructional design so that you're getting information when you need it, as you can absorb it, you're getting to practice. The hugest thing missing, Randy, I think is, or has been, people need time to practice a skill and to get feedback.
Yeah.
So
you're giving me that. Okay.
Yeah. So you mentioned the word information and train. So training versus information. So information could be the 43 slides that Teddy stuff down my throat.
Yes,
that's information. So the difference between that and training then is
people need to be informed and able to be better at something. What you just described is, like we used to say, picking the top off of somebody's head and pouring stuff in. And it really is not good, cognitively speaking. And people can read. I mean, if your people can read, don't show them slides unless you're showing something really technical or it's a visual, it needs to be a visual. Words on slides are better not shown. Don't show people words on slides because it's actually bad. It's not just not good, it's bad.
Well, and especially if somebody's doing nothing but reading those words off the slide out loud. And and if there are 43 of those slides, it's killing me now. Teddy, I see that we've had a couple good questions in there. So
Don had a good question, Nancy. And how would a job candidate evaluate a company in the context of their commitment to training? What's some good flags that job seekers should look for when they're evaluating a company?
I would be asking things like, do you have competency models for the various roles? So in other words, if I'm a candidate, I'm going to say, I'm going to ask, how will I be? What's the training available to me? Is there a career path?
Yeah.
I would just ask those kinds of questions. How do you develop people? How successful do you measure? Well, this is something you wouldn't probably ask unless you wanted to be in this field. How do you measure whether learning has occurred? All those kinds of questions. Don't ask, do you believe in training or do you support training? Because nobody will ever say, no, we don't. However, the truth might be far from, what is said. Well, it's like anything else.
Totally.
Yeah, you ask a company, you ask somebody during an interview, what's your culture like? Most people do not, even people who should know, aren't really attuned with the actual culture. They've got words on a wall, we value creativity, we are inclusive. But if you ask people who are doing the work every day, they might have a different perception. So if you really want to know about training, you have to dig deep.
Yeah, ask more questions. We actually have more questions in the chat too. That's a good thing. Teddy, what you got?
Before I go to Bruce or Mike's question, I'll tell you that I recently looked at some organizations and to discover what kind of training programs they have. And I learned there's a company in Greensboro, North Carolina called Lincoln Financial. Lincoln has a pretty big workforce. They have a program called Lincoln Preparation Program. And it's a 2-year professional development program for their employees. That's pretty cool. And it's very well staffed and managed. That's the kind of thing you look for, what kind of, employee development programs, emerging leader programs. So to add to the answer to Don is I would look for those types of programs within corporations. Bruce asked this question. In the world we're in now, there seems to be a huge proliferation of training opportunities. Nancy, can you speak to that? How do we separate the great training opportunities from he used the word wheat and chaff? A lot of training companies that are all about knowledge pushing and not training.
Yes, so I wonder, I would ask another question. I wonder whether he's talking about external versus, within a company. Yeah. If you're talking about external, I would probably not embark on something that would take a lot of time, a lot of effort and or money, unless I could see a sample of it, or I could, again, get answers to the questions about, will what I'm learning be measured? You want to really know if it's going to meet your need. And also if it's going to be, as Randy said, like you wanted to blow your head off because you were just you want to look at how will it be delivered, because training delivery is not what it was when I started my career. You want to be able to access something when you can. When you're available, you want to be, this is my opinion, you love to be able to interact with other learners somehow through a social medium, or, you don't want, I don't think information being thrown at you, again, unless you want to learn. But that's kind of, Bruce, I think you said your name. It's primarily external. Yeah. If you would like to vet training, email me, call me, I'll help.
I'm with Bruce throughout that. They're mostly external trainers, they're knocking on company doors. And there are a lot of companies that are growing, trying to do more virtual. And I refer to this as knowledge pushing, not training. Mike threw out a question about, or a statement about training. He says he got recruited by a local training organization who I also studied under that organization for many years. They're trying to hire trainers. There's a lot more work going on. And however, a lot of these trainers, the organizations, John Maxwell, Richardson, Sandler Training, Dale Carnegie Training, all of these are great programs, great organizations with rich content and rich ability to improve people's lives. However, you eat what you kill in those organizations. So if you want to become any one of those trainers, you're not just a trainer, you're a business developer as well. Nothing wrong with that if that's a life you like to live. Randy?
Yeah, I mean, and I think we've all been in those cases where it's one thing if we're self-employed, and you've done that as well, Nancy. I mean, not only do you have to provide the services, you got to go out and secure the contracts. You've got to go out and make it happen. And that's, just to get off on a slight tangent here, that's one of the drawbacks that a lot of folks, and I deal with this from time to time with clients who say, every man's dream is to own his own company. And I get that from an emotional standpoint, and females as well. But, that's the old saying, whatever. So, but here's the thing. You may be great at fixing computers, or you may be great at, painting walls. You may have the skill to provide the service, but do you also have the sales and marketing ability to go out and secure the business in the first? And if you don't, how are you going to get that?
Yeah.
How are you going to get the word out? Do you have to hire somebody? Do you have enough money? And again, to think through all of those steps is one thing. To say, okay, I like to help job hunters. I think I'll open my own business and see what happens. Good luck. That may happen. It may not work for you. Same thing with you, Nancy, too. Now, for you, you've had the background in it. You know what works. You know what doesn't work well. And so you bring a wealth of knowledge, having lived that life, versus somebody who just kind of says, hey, I like to talk. I like to teach.
Yeah, I like people.
I can do it. I could be a sales guy. I like to talk.
Yeah,
I like people. I'm a people person.
Yeah, we used to laugh.
Yeah.
No, HR professionals say I'm a people person.
Yeah, they do too. They all do.
We don't say that.
We all do. Yeah.
No. You do have to care about people. You don't have to like people. You have to care about people. You have to care about how learning can help businesses, thrive. You have to care about how people learn. So I'm going back to Bruce for a second. Don't kill me. Don't kill me. If a trainer if somebody's knocking on your door and they want to sell you training, these are the questions. What's your background? Because a lot of people do not have, and you don't necessarily need an academic background, but it really, really helps, because there are a lot of people who say they're professionals and they're not. They might be highly technically capable, which is huge in training. And if you're hugely interested in technology, there's a place for you. If you're hugely interested in data, there's a place for you. I mean, the field is huge, huge, huge. But if somebody knocks on your door, you want to see an example, at least one, of something that they've done. And you want to ask, how did you know that it was successful? A lot of people out there are not selling things that are going to work for your organization.
Teddy, it's almost half past the hour, so why don't you attend to your task there?
Hey, we got lots of activity on LinkedIn Live and Facebook Live, and thanks to everybody who's here. This is I'm Teddy Burriss, my good host, buddy Randy Wooden. You're on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy, and our special guest today is Nancy Krauss. The conversation is about training and performance, and we're trying to align that to how you can use it in your job search, your job career, as well as in your business. So thanks for joining us. Randy, back to you.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Teddy. And again, Nancy Krauss joins us all the way from Miami, Florida, and here to talk about training. You've had a good long career in training in Fortune 500s, as well as other entities, and also on your own for many years. So you've seen training really morph and evolve over the years, I'm sure, and maybe we'll get a chance to share some of your observations on that. Something that we've talked at Goodwill from time to time, not just for our Goodwill employees, people like me, but also out in the marketplace. And that is what's called a skills gap. We've got people coming out of high school that can't read or write. They can't run any kind of level of technical machinery or any kind of technology. Those people are destined to a life of poverty for the most part. If you don't have the basic skills to be able to perform jobs. And so and maybe this is a philosophical thing here, so dive in as you feel appropriate, but how do we marry the businesses who say we need X, Y, and Z skills? And then how do we as a society then try to fill that skills gap with people who are trained in the stuff that's needed today? I mean, Teddy can fix a typewriter. Look behind him. He's got a typewriter, right? He knows how to fix that. And he can fix that stupid phone behind him too that he didn't put on hold today. Put your phone on hold, Teddy, on Do Not Disturb.
Sorry,
there you go.
Apologize for that.
What is the skills gap, and how do we try to tackle that thing from a trainer standpoint?
You're asking me, I assume.
I am.
Okay, so as far as the skills gap for people entering the workforce, that's very different from the skills gap within, the world of adults already working. But a lot of organizations right now are partnering with high schools and community colleges to help them, those institutions of learning, better prepare people to work. There's, in my opinion, huge lack of opportunities for people who aren't maybe going to be the I'm going to college type, and I really want to use my intellectual capability. A lot of people, remember work, people doing things in their hands and their bodies, apprentice programs, things of that nature. I don't think that there are enough of those, because we've learned not everybody should be higher educated. There aren't necessarily jobs for everybody. And, the workplace, the world has changed a lot. So I think it really is, better educating high school students and helping young people understand, what are they good at? What does the world need? And I think that the world, high schools, colleges, community colleges need to better prepare people to be able to work.
Yeah, and that's something we see a lot with Goodwill, and we try our best to reach out to the area businesses and say, what is it you need? And what are those trade skills that so many people, in fact, Teddy, a few weeks back, we had Terry Cummings, and we had the name escapes me, but from Precise Tech, talking about internships and apprenticeships.
Danielle Rose.
Yep. Rach, was it Tanya? What
Danielle Rose and
Danielle
Terry
Rose.
Cummings.
Yep.
Randy, I got all the information right here in front of me, buddy.
Oh man, that's why you're so valuable, Teddy. I appreciate it. Thank you. But here again, that's a problem, and it's a bit of a separate issue from the world that you have typically lived in. I mean, you're dealing with corporate America, and how do we train and better prepare the people we have to perform better?
Yes.
And I don't know that there's a formal, nice way to summarize this in a really short little package. But how do we know we're doing a good job? How do we know? How do we quantify? Are there metrics that we use that says, you know what, this works, let's do more of it? How do we get to that point where we feel good about that we're doing the right thing?
All right, I'll tell you what my boss says.
Oh,
she says, look at the P&L. If it's not growing, we ain't doing it right, including training. But
gotcha.
Nancy, I would wager you have another perspective.
No, similar. All training, all things that are called learning should have a direct or indirect, but you really know that it's going to impact something about the business, right? So the business wants to either make more money, save money. I mean, there are lots of business goals, but anything that we do as professionals should directly align to and support, and we should know that we can support the betterment of that. And that's kind of a practice within our field, and it's called performance analysis or needs analysis, but it really all goes down to the bottom line, literally. How will this help and how can we measure it? So the first piece in creating anything that we call a learning event or training is what is the gap? Is there a gap? and how can we know whether we filled the gap? So before you even start thinking about what do they have to know? How will we deliver it? What are the materials? You have to know whatever it is, how will we know that it worked? And that's a skill set. That's part of what a capability that has to be, that you need in this field, if that's the kind of work you're going to do. And it's called front-end analysis or needs analysis. That's the starting point.
So all right. So, I mean, that sounds good, but I'm not that smart. So give me something, dumb it down so I can see, okay, is it a spreadsheet that says, okay, this guy used to be able to count to 10. Now we can have to count to 11. I mean, how do we know? It's like marketing too.
Right.
We spend a lot on marketing, and there are some ways to measure success with coupon codes and so forth, direct, linkage. But give me an example, something that I can envision that says, okay, this is an example of how we can know that we're doing a better job of training.
All right, I'm going to give you an example. Has to do with training new managers in the technical pieces of their job, such as understanding a P&L, monitoring performance of other people, understanding understanding maintenance of vehicles. So this was a Fortune 500 company where there had never been formal training of these frontline supervisors. So that's an example of, if they've never learned it, if they don't know how to do it, if they haven't been trained, then you do need to train. But to know what to train and how to train, it's a process called needs analysis or front-end analysis that you dive into, what exactly do they need? So here's a little piece, training in the P&L. I actually designed this, working with a subject matter expert who was from that job. This is a model for learning that works. Having professional people or people who know a lot about learning, pairing up with a subject matter expert, because I used to always say to people, who I met and I was going to do work for, I'm a professional dummy. I don't know rocket science, but I know that I'll be training people in that field. So I need a subject matter expert to work with me, because I'm never going to learn to be a rocket scientist, but it doesn't mean I can't develop training. I'm not going to train them. I want a subject expert to actually be the one who's, their resource. But anyway, P&L. So we created a piece of learning, which was breaking down and showing a P&L and all the inputs and where they come from, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So people had the knowledge. And then in the face-to-face training, we used to only do face-to-face training. Have them practice with some case studies. So here's a ton of information, guys. You already know, but can you do it? Can you look at this business and look at the P&L and make sense of it? Can you analyze it? And here's the most important part, people. Did they do it when they went back to their shop?
Bingo.
So,
I'm with you on that.
So learning only really can take place when a person's supervisor or manager, understands what is going to happen to their person. We talk about outputs in training. So a trained person can do this. If you're a leader, your people who have been trained, they're not a product, obviously, but how do you know that the training worked? Can they do it? So supervisors have to be able to monitor, care about, ask questions about, what did you learn? And most important, be able to give feedback about.
So Nancy, I'm with you. As a trainer, a knowledge transfer person and a coach, and which is to me, the sum of a trainer, give you the knowledge and coach you to practice it. I discovered the best way to measure is, are they doing it? And is it impacting the bottom line the way we want to impact the bottom line? Hey, Nancy, Don asked a great question. He says, what can an outside trainer, and I think Don's asking this a little bit facetiously, but I get why he's asking it because it's an important question. What can an outside trainer bring to a company that the inside staff can't do? How can we help them stay away from that DIY trap?
Yes, well, if an outside trainer can fill a skills gap, that the corporation company business doesn't have, and they can demonstrate that, that's something.
Yeah.
Is that the question? That can't
Yeah.
be done. Yeah, I mean, this is gonna make you giggle, I hope. I worked for a Fortune 500 company that had 40,000 people within. They did not have an instructional designer, not one. So they were creating training. Sure, they had people in the training department. They were delivering training. They weren't really measuring whether anything happened. So that was an issue, but they didn't have a person trained or knowledgeable or skilled at actually creating the learner experience.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Unfortunately, there's lots of companies that get trapped into that. We can do it ourselves and it's okay. And unlikely, without going too deep in it, it's probably because they were not measuring the true outcome. Randy?
Yeah, and I kind of go back to beat this dead horse one more time. And this deals with tangible results. So I get it, for example, with a P&L, or I get it if you're trying to teach me, calculus, and I either pass the test or I don't. And that is a X's and O's example of, okay, I went through the training. It sunk in enough for me to perform those tasks. But what about the softer skill thing like problem solving, leadership, things that it's somewhat like grab and air? How do you define that I am now better at conflict resolution, or I am better at some of the communication skills, that soft skill stuff? How do companies get a good sense that they're hitting the mark with that kind of training?
Well, what companies do is, or what they should be doing, let me backtrack for a second. Anything that's worth doing at all in the workplace can be measured and monitored, even if not necessarily with our own eyes, right? So when you're talking about a leader's performance, people see what they do, right? People, their peers, their leaders. I mean, if you've got a defined set of, here is what leadership is, for example, here's what we want in our company, this is what good leaders do. This is what they look like, not look like visually, but this is how they behave. Everybody can see it. This is how they speak to people. This is how people feel when they're interacting. So you've got to really define what makes that good leader or supervisor or communicator. If you can define it, and if you know what it is when you see it, you have to find, and you can find a way to measure or monitor. And it can be through a self-assessment. Of course, self-assessments are your own self, and you might not really know what how other people see you, but this is why companies use 360-degree tools. You are asking people who work with you or work for you, how good am I at this? Or, on a scale, am I good at this? How am I doing? Getting feedback. There are other metrics. Again, this is a science now of, performance and learning. How do we know? And that this, requires a special skill sets and, abilities to put those measuring tools in place.
Yeah, I'm with you. Now that COVID has hit, it's changed the world. And so there's a whole lot of remote learning going on these days. And from a training perspective, I mean, you used to do most of your stuff, I assume, in individual or small groups or whatever, but not virtually. And in your view, how has being it now virtual, has that helped? Has it hindered? It certainly changed somewhat in how we deliver training. What are your thoughts on not only the difference in effectiveness, but also, how has it changed the training? What are your thoughts on not only the difference in effectiveness, but also, how has it changed the training? What are your thoughts on not only the difference in effectiveness, but also, how has it changed the training? What are your thoughts on not only the difference in effectiveness, but also, how has it changed the training? What are your thoughts on not only the difference in effectiveness, but also, how has it changed the training? What are your thoughts on not only the difference in effectiveness, but also, how has it changed the training? What are your thoughts on not only the difference in effectiveness, but also, how has it changed the training? What are your thoughts on not only the difference in effectiveness, but also, how has it changed the training? What are your thoughts on not only the difference in effectiveness, but also, how has it changed the training? What are your thoughts on not only the difference in effectiveness, but also, how has it changed the training? What are your thoughts on not only the difference in effectiveness, but also, how has it maybe things that you've learned along the way this last year and a half.
Well, that's a big question. I'll try to be succinct. The things that make training good are the same, regardless of the delivery. That sounds very simplistic and maybe even silly, but again, virtual learning can be really good or really poor. The same things apply. Whatever you're looking for, can you measure it? How can you measure it? There are ways that we can measure things without actually seeing them. People don't like to hear about the word testing, but we talked earlier about, the most important thing is, can they do it on the job? Yes, but first we want to know, did they actually learn it? So that's a lower level of evaluation. And then we want to know, so, it's neither good nor bad. Virtual learning can be fantastic. There are some platforms that people are using now that incorporate being with other people, even if it's virtually, testing, doing something on the job, doing something away from the formal environment of the virtual learning, and then coming back, showing people, getting feedback. All of these things can be accomplished, but there is starting to be a trend in that organizations are missing face-to-face for certain things that are just much easier to do when people are with each other. But you can do skills practice virtually. You can do role plays to learn to develop those soft skills virtually.
Yeah.
Hey, Teddy has a crystal ball over there. I don't have a magic wand, but let's go with it. This is my magic wand. And Nancy, I'm giving this to you now. So you have a magic wand, and you've got just a moment or two here to share if you have a thought or two on how in a perfect world training needs to change. Is there something, if you can point to something that says this stuff has sucked all these years, it hasn't worked, and if I ruled the world and it was all under me, and this is what we need to do. Is there a key thing that you'd like people to take away that says this is what we need to be focused more on? And there may not be, I don't know, but if there is,
as learning professionals or as companies or as people,
you pick, but we got just a couple minutes, but you pick what you got. Because I'm curious, we've always done it this way. This is how we've done training. It's always worked. Hey, no problem. And so, but yet we're not getting any better. So what do we do to improve the process, or do we just need to hire better people? Could be a combination of both, huh?
It's you gotta hire for the skills that you need. You have to know that people have those skills. If people don't, again, just in the learning world, if you're going to throw training at people, make sure that they know before the training things that they need to know in order to learn. That's a huge question. I personally wish that more learning professionals had more background in things like adult learning, cognitive science, really understanding the performance piece versus just here's a lot of stuff you have to know, because the goal of training is to improve or enhance performance or teach new.
So there might lie the answer to the question, Nancy, is for more individuals, leaders, and business owners to understand that training is not an activity. It's a philosophy to move your people. And I might still not have the words right. It's something that we do to make our people and our organization better. And if we can't measure that happened, we didn't do it right.
Absolutely. 100%. Can I just say something about how you could enter the field if you're interested?
Absolutely. Please do. Yeah.
So the first thing is to think about, really, do you care about how people learn? And do you care about understanding you have to understand the business that you're working in or for. What are the drivers of success and performance? And how do people support that, right? Because we're all doing the best at what we do, but we should all be doing things that are going to help the business, right? So that has to do, this is a tangent, with job design. But as a learning professional person, you want to know that if you create something, you do something to help people be better, you want to know that it in fact will make an impact. And you know, there is an art and a science to doing that. But first, understand what it is that people in our field do. I had something to show you. It's called the talent development capability model, but maybe you can put in the chat.
I'll share it on the YouTube video.
ATD, it's a professional organization where you can learn everything you need to know and even get some skill in one of the many areas of learning and development. Understand what skills you already have that are transferable, because there are lots of things that everybody on this Zoom are doing right now and capabilities that you have that can easily transfer into a different field or profession if you're not in the profession. So understand what your transferable skills are, and then be able to talk about them in the language of the learning and development field. And then last, you kind of have to rebrand yourself so that you look the part, and it's obvious that you've got the abilities to really contribute in this field. If you're in a company, go to the function, go to the people and say, I want to help. You can they probably really need help and would love some help. Of course, you'd be volunteering your time, but you know, get to know them, get to know what they do. People in all fields love to talk about what they do. And in learning in our field, especially, I find most people really are people. They want to help you. They'd love to have your help. If you're a subject matter expert, you can be training people. You just need to learn how to do that well. Not everybody can just be a trainer. They think they can, as far as, you know, facilitating, you know, managing a group, managing something, you know, interactive. But volunteer. The best people in my experience to be leadership development trainers are, guess what? Good leaders. Leaders.
Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff.
I'm with you. Thank you very much, Nancy, for joining us today, all the way from Miami, Florida, home of the Miami Dolphins, and football season just around the corner. So yeah, hopefully it'll cool off below 100 degrees where you are.
November.
Yeah, November and the 90% humidity out there. It's crazy, but all good. Thank you again, Nancy, for joining us. Teddy and I will share a quick story, and we'll mention about our next week's guests. And when
Hey,
I say
where was lunch? I didn't get lunch.
we have two guests, it's not in the budget.
Nancy, that guy didn't knock on your door?
No.
He was supposed to knock on your door.
Hey, Teddy. I'll do a kind of my little story here, and then you do it, and then throw it to me. I'll mention
buddy.
the
I got my story.
I got a couple things here. One, with Goodwill, what I do is I help job hunters do a better job of the job hunt. And I'm dealing with by and large college educated professionals that aren't necessarily accustomed to the ins and outs of the job hunt, and everything from LinkedIn to how a resume should go together. And so, so it's not something they do every day. And so I can kind of complement their other skills with what I'll call the job hunt skills. And I'm happy to do that all day long. But you know what? There's a difference. And this is something that we touched on earlier today, the difference between the how to and the want to. And I frankly, I'm not alone. And others within Goodwill would say the same thing. I have every confidence that sometimes they, meaning the Goodwill employee, cares more about the success of the job hunter than the job hunter does. The job hunter wants us to do it for them. Okay. Wants us to write the resume for them, wants us to get a job for them, and really doesn't have the want to embrace and to take the coaching and training that we provide for free. Now, maybe if we charged for it, then there would be a greater okay, now I got skin in the game. But the bottom line is a lot of times people, they don't care. And when it comes to training and learning and such, if somebody doesn't have the want to, you can sit there all day long with the how to, and it's a waste.
Not gonna happen.
And something else too, in our former CEO, Art Gibble, would talk this frequently anytime he had the opportunity to speak to groups and even individually, and that is to be a lifelong learner.
Yeah.
And to be able to remain relevant. You think back years ago, high school diploma, you could get a job at Reynolds Tobacco running a piece of machinery, and you didn't have to have technical skills. You just needed to be dependable and work hard. Yeah. And these days, we mentioned the skills gap, but if you don't remain relevant and continue to add and develop not only the skills you have now, but add on new skills to stay competitive, you're going to get tossed aside. And the same for companies too. If they're not training people to stay relevant, the company is also going to suffer. And so lifelong learning is key. And Teddy, I know you talk about that a lot too. So I'll be quiet now and throw it your way. But lifelong learning is something that is more than just a catchphrase. I think it's something we need to embrace and have it become a way of life.
It's one of the reasons why I read more than the comics every day, even though I learn from the comics.
Oh man, there's a lot to learn from the comics, especially Dilbert.
Yeah. Hey, here's my story this week.
Yeah.
I changed. Go ahead, Nancy.
Yeah.
I just was going to say, we have the want to do, then we have the can do, but you forgot about will do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Will.
Yeah. Here's my story. I changed my life significantly when I changed this viewpoint. My viewpoint used to be, when I was in corporate America making my $83 million that I have in my mind, my viewpoint was, I want to help businesses be successful. I started learning new ideas and I changed my mantra. And I said, I want to help individuals be successful. And today I stick to that mantra. I want to help individuals be successful. And along the way, which included Toastmasters, ATD, hanging out with L&D professionals, hanging out with other trainers and coaches and mentors, I've discovered in order for me to help individuals be successful, including myself, not only do I have to have knowledge transfer, which means I have to learn something, but I also have to be guided on it if I don't know how to do it myself or figure it out. Mm-hmm. And I have to be willing to experiment with it. And this is when I'm doing my work as a trainer and coach. I train people, I coach them, I encourage them, and I help them experiment. That is how we learn. And I'm grateful I learned that years ago, and grateful for Nancy being here. Nancy and I are connected in another space, and she shows up here and it blew me away. I was like, Randy, where are you finding my people? So
it's a Nancy, small world. It's a small world. Thank you, Nancy. Hey, by the way, next week, and Teddy, I'll mention our guest and I'll turn it to you to close it out. Next week, we have two guests coming on. Both are attorneys. And before you kind of go, oh, attorneys, we're going to have to listen to long verbiage and big paragraphs and all that. The answer is no. Many of you know Mike Wells Sr. Mike is an icon here in our local communities, very involved in charitable organizations, gives freely of his time, just a great guy. And he writes a column on and off. It's been for many years now, what he's learned on his way to the courthouse. And it's sort of I'll use the word Andy Griffith-ish kind of stuff. It's sort of the folksy lawyer that says, hey, here's how you can get through life. Here's some tips and ways to do that. So he's going to share some anecdotal stories, but to bring it back to the job hunt in business, let's face it, you've been living under a rock if you don't know that COVID has really impacted how businesses operate. What are the guidelines? What are the state regulations that dictate what can be done, what can't be done? What about from the employee standpoint? All kinds of things, whether it's COVID, whether it's the unemployment benefits and such. So also Roberta Latham, another attorney, is going to join us, and she specializes in employment law. So if you have questions about everything from, I'm making this up now, but let's say ageism, discrimination, wrongful termination, non-competes, COVID regulations, I don't know, I'm making this up as I go, but there's a myriad of things out there that employment law touches. So we're going to take your questions. So be sure to join us so you can get answers in real time. They're not here to offer, detailed legal advice to individuals. We get that. But the bottom line is you're going to come away with some knowledge about what the law says, particularly here in the state of North Carolina. And also we'll have some laughs and share some old stories with Mike Wells. So join us next week. Teddy, that's it. I'll turn it to you and take us home.
Good. Nancy, again,
Yep.
thanks a lot for showing up. Appreciate your insights and ideas. I'll get those documents from you and
Yep.
add those to the YouTube video. Hey, everybody, thanks for showing up for Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. We'll see you next Wednesday at 11:55 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
See you. Take care.